Good day, folks. I'd like to talk to you today about some information, basically Tesla's secrets. And we all know very well the typical research that Tesla contributed with his Tesla coils and his lab on Long Island and Colorado Springs. But even in his Colorado Spring notes, there's information missing. And even with the experiments that Tesla did on Long Island, that famous night when he got freaked out with the luminance and just left his research there and never came back was a really odd moment. It was a kind of realization. But again, there's no explanation on what exactly came to Tesla's mind. So I'll give you the best I can of the information that I've gathered along the years and put it together, because no one seems to, explain it all in one simple frame set that's easy to understand here. So we have to go back to the basics, right? So everybody basically understands how Tesla essentially wanted to use the Earth here. Well, say this is our Earth, and I'm very bad at drawing, but you've got the islands here, and North America over here, and Florida over there, and something like that, okay? So anyways, the whole idea basically is, Tesla creates this pumping effect with the Earth, and he was going to use his high frequency coils and use the ionosphere as one conductor and the Earth as the other, okay? So this is the traditional, essentially, explanation of what he was up to, and essentially was testing. And we're led to believe that even with his experiments and the good range he did get of a few miles, up to tens of miles in some cases, that essentially the project failed because he needed to make a stronger tower and whatnot, and it never got to that. But the project never really failed. It's just Tesla sort of kept it as a, quote, maybe a conspiracy of the day, if you want to call it that, but it was definitely information that was put behind. So basically, to understand Tesla's philosophy is he wanted to use the Earth's resonant frequency, the Schumann resonance, essentially, very low frequencies. So what happens is, again, here's our Earth, and because of natural systems here, of the various earth currents through the wind streams opposing each other and the Gulf streams and everything else, you got your earth currents, your teoretic currents and whatnot, and that's all in motion. It's systems in motion, which creates a resonance effect. What I'm getting at is the Earth is basically one big resonant pump that is able to self-regauge its field because of all of these various, you've got motion and action opposing whatever mechanics that will create a potential difference, oscillating at, because of the diameter of the Earth, the Schumann resonance. So all these systems could intercouple with each other because of the systems of resonance. So Tesla took that into consideration and figured, the Earth can actually be our source of asymmetrical regauging that Tom Bearden was talking about. So if you're looking at an LC circuit, which is essentially a coil, and your capacitor here, and then you get this ping pong action. Once you give it a pulse, this is a DC pulse, this is you're ringing it at its oscillating tune frequency determined by your L and C values, you get the ping pong action. And what happens here, this trigger ends up giving you an actual AC waveform cycle, and what we end up having here is a displacement current. So it becomes a reactive power supply. Now, reactive power is not the same as real power, and reactive power, due to the ping pong action at perfect oscillation, could be seen as a form of internal superconductivity. So in other words, this isn't bound to the traditional Ohm's law restrictions because of this effect, as long, of course, as, you know, no free lunch. You got to keep giving it that it's like the equivalent of the swing. You give it a small push once it gets going, and as long as you maintain, the swing keeps going at its full force. Same thing here. You provide that trigger, you get that, and depending on the resonant conditions, that could be an amplified, you know, so you end up having more displacement current. But it doesn't come for free, okay? So now Tesla is thinking of all of this and is going, okay, I'm going to use the Earth as the input, but on its own you need to initiate something. So Tesla decided, I'm going to build my big Tesla coil here outside. This would be at the Long Island area, and this is the big Tesla coil that's so famous in all the pictures here. Okay, so what happens here is he's got the Earth down here, and then he's got the ionosphere up here. Okay, so his idea is to send a high voltage pulse here, matching the Earth's frequency, and he charges at high voltage the ionosphere. And what happens is now he creates what he does. There's already a natural potential difference. This is where lightnings and all of that happen. But Tesla wanted to tap and modify the system. So by doing this, he's drastically creating an artificial but very stronger disturbance. So now what happens is you've got a major potential difference up here versus the Earth's natural potential down here. So you've got the coil part here, which is your L, and then he uses the environment as his dielectric between the ionosphere and the coil. So this becomes your capacitance. So now all of a sudden this resembles our traditional LC, reactive displacement current power supply, as long as you trigger it at the right pulse, like Tesla was doing with his sharp discharges right here. So he initiates this at the resonant frequency of the Earth, this artificial difference. He triggers this reactive power supply, gigantic, Earth scale literally, because he's using the potential difference of the Earth, the environment as the dielectric, and then he creates this system here. Now remember what I said, you're not bounded by Ohm's law between the ping pong action. Now in this case, because it's the whole Earth, because that wavelength is resonant with the Earth's diameter, if you look at the waveform between the ping pong action, no matter where you are situated on the Earth as a tap, wherever the wave happens to be, you've got access at all times to that full displacement current. So all you have to do is create an additional tap, and you can maybe even have, if you need more, another resonant LC system, create a new localized displacement field initialized by the first one, and let's say whatever it is, here's your 1 kilowatts, let's just say, right? Anywhere you are on Earth, because it's taking advantage of this system here. Now, what's not in the papers that no one talks about is because this is in resonance with the Earth, once Tesla initiates this trigger pulse, it's not a traditional system no more, because we're using the asymmetrical regauging properties of the Earth's ability to be able to pump at this frequency. So we're synchronizing with the pump of phase of the Earth. So what happens here is, and this is what he doesn't tell you, maybe because of his own security at the time, it's just, if you understand where this is going, this is really big. He starts the sequence, and as soon as it's synchronized, within a few moments, he can kill it. And the system will be self-regaged from the Earth. So it's a self-pumped system once he initiates the trigger, and a self-amplifying one that can potentially, as Tesla explained, he could split the Earth in half, but he never explained the mechanisms behind it. So that's very nice. So how do you stop it? Well, the only way, folks, is Tesla had to have an identical setup underground. What I call the anti-phase signal. So what he had to do is, for not this to go out of hand, he had to send the kill signal, which is basically an out of phase. You got what is considered constructive interference, and you've got deconstructive interference. So what you're going to do here is oppose. So he had enough. This is what he didn't talk about, is the clone system underneath. So this may have had a primary feature at first, what we talk about ground tuning, to help with the trigger. But once the trigger is established, this has a secondary purpose, is once we need to terminate this pumping effect, we trigger this one here at the anti-phase. Now remember, folks, energy can be created or destroyed. So when you're creating the anti-phase, you're just interrupting the natural process and converting it into another form of energy. This is what we're talking about again when we're phasing the signals in opposite phase at 180 degrees and you get the scalar. Well, in this case here, you can say that you end up with the pure pointing vectors only. So what does that mean in English? Well, basically you're converting this into a powerful, you're discharging the accumulated pump energy, the phase pump, and then you're discharging it and terminating it as a scalar wave. Now, remember when we talk about the interaction with the vacuum and the gravity, it doesn't just happen with radio waves. You have to start mixing phase variance to create these scalar waves and interact with the spin and the curve of space-time itself. But when you start introducing these phase variants, you start meeting those conditions now. So what happened is, what really freaked Tesla out is when he sent the kill switch, because his experiment he was seeing probably getting out of hand, he needed to shut it off. He sends the kill switch, creates the anti-phase signal. Now that created a huge scalar discharge, and that's where you actually saw the illumination of the sky and the sea glowing and everything. That was the result of the alteration of physical reality itself created by the giant scalar potential. So he killed the self-pumping all right, but created this giant secondary effect that basically disturbed the fabric of our very own space-time itself. So Tesla probably realized at that point, this is not going to go, this is too dangerous, and if this gets out, you know, people will destroy us, because can you imagine today, folks, this would probably be pretty easy to replicate if someone's heart desires, which is totally like scary when you want to think about it, once you understand what the dynamics really are. So then, this went right to scraps, essentially, once Tesla realized, can't do this, way too powerful, we're going to destroy the universe. So he had to think of something smaller scale. So he moves on to Colorado Springs. He was very interested in high frequency. Tesla's famous one-wire system. There's a lot of information out there, localized about it, but again, there's a lot of things missing. So what was Tesla really up to? Well, he wanted to basically set up a decentralized power distribution system. What does that mean? Well, he had to figure out the next best thing, since he couldn't use the Earth's energy the way he wanted to. and you just couldn't control it. And when you did, the side effects were, you know, it could have been the magnetic equivalent of an atomic bomb in some cases, right? So, very scary stuff. But he still believed in the concept of distributing the energy in more efficient ways. So looking at the system at high frequency now, you get a similar effect, a tower outside, resonant at high frequency on a hilltop. So what you're getting now, of course, you're going to be subject to RF damping laws and everything, but choosing a compatible frequency will help make these interactions more minimal, less noticeable. So Tesla did experiments with high frequencies, trying to give the most wireless potential, so to speak, you know, as a RF transmitter, but that's not where he wanted to end it. So he figured, you know, that roughly about, he was getting 20 miles or so of excitement from this high frequency, much scaled down version. So again, same concepts, but a smaller scale here. You're ending up with a reactive power supply where you only provide a trigger to maintain reactive current, which is displacement current. But of course, much weaker system. But you still have the same effects. So what Tesla wanted to do is he demonstrated that with one wire, you can go along and eliminate this wireless drag. And because we're still dealing with displacement current, you're not subject to Ohm's law losses if you're still dealing with the pure displacement field. So here he is at high frequency, one wire, using a reactive power supply to trigger it. So we're feeding off pure reactive power at high frequency. Every 20 miles or so, there's a tap, also known as a repeater, because it's an LC circuit, which triggers more displacement, which could even be injected and continued on for another 20 miles. Now, this is decentralized power distribution, all on one wire, where every client also becomes an additional contribution of that energy grid. This only makes sense because, you know, you'd be a lot easier to withstand storms. Solar systems coast to coast could interact where there's always sun in some point in the continent to feed into the trigger, which means they would solve the problems of, you know, not having one energy system from natural sources available at all times to the one wire system. They could all be linked and part of the net. And the load determines naturally which distribution system puts out the most through displacement current. So again, society, the elites know all of this, folks. It's just, they won't let it be this way for obvious reasons. This disturbs the whole world we live in, if you see where this is going. But just telling you, in theory and technology, this, especially in our day and age, piece of cake, and it solves all of the green energy issues. It helps with solar power, wind power. If you build a decentralized distribution network, all off reactive power, again, without being subject to Ohm's law, of course, from the point where you tap into it and serve a closed loop, which would be a house on an inverter or something. But you get the point, right? The distribution net is all reactive. It just makes sense. And this is what Tesla wanted to do. But he didn't tell you what he was up to, I guess because the competition at the time would eat him alive, obviously, right? If Edison were to get grips of what this was going to be all about at the time, he would have really, really freaked out, right? Along with other investors. So Tesla, I guess, kept it to himself. So I'm just putting all the pieces together for you all because I never seen quite a an all-in-one presentation that gets right down to the core, and it's all what we're doing. It's reactive, it's displacement current, it's one wire high frequency transmission. It's all there. This could all be built basically a la Don Smith on a small scale, and do the very same things. You just gotta put your thinking cap on and figure out how to downscale this, and you could use it for yourself in the meantime, right? I mean, why not? So I hope this will help people understand in general what we're going after and what Tesla was doing. So as always looking forward to your comments, and thank you for watching, folks.